All right, check it out. Yazi phela namhlanje it is Human Rights Day, right? And I just thought, Tuguti, let's unpack it ngogwethu as a youth, you know what I mean? Because I feel as though a lot of young people, we don't really quite understand. I say we, I'm not saying you. We don't really quite understand. Ukuthi leshandisi hlanganaphi ngenaphi kanjani kanjani. So to help me out today, we are joined by one of the greatest minds of our generation. So this guy really is a spokesperson for the young people of South Africa. He is the authority. Simbiza Nota Baloyi. Put no tunjani.
Sikhona.
I know, Ivar, you're one of the greatest minds. Like, I actually wonder sometimes what it's like.
I'm flattered, and yeah,
yeah, boy, yes. Like I was saying, I sometimes wonder when you're not thinking about, your career, when you're not thinking about social issues. What do you think about? Like things that make you smile, things that put a smile on your face.
Nature, I think, maybe. Like, I look at the sky, I see birds,
Yeah.
The greatness of God's creations, you know what I mean? It's just so amazing. I think, yeah. Like everything else that's problematic is man-made.
That's deep.
And and everything that brings one joy and happiness is made by God. So,
So, Gahle, if you want to be happy, focus on things that are made by God.
Yeah.
Basically.
That's it. That's all that matters.
That's what's up. So, Putnota, as a youth, I feel as though whenever there's a public holiday, we don't care what the public holiday is. Inner enjoyment, gigs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because youth in one place. But I feel as though a lot of us, and I include myself in this, as youth, we don't quite understand why we celebrate a holiday such as a Human Rights Day. So, Ngicela, with your own understanding in very simple terms, why do we celebrate Human Rights Day?
Well, Human Rights Day is commemorated because on this day, some 62 years ago, 1960, there was a march organized by the Pan-Africanist Congress, a party called the PAC, which was then led by Robert Sobukwe. And they led a protest which was descended upon by the police, and they fired live rounds at gathered crowds in Sharpeville, killing 69 people and injuring 180 people. So it's Human Rights Day for us because we celebrate human rights, as well as like on this day, Namibia officially gained its independence from South Africa in 1990. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So, all of that is part of the commemoration of Human Rights Day today. The Sharpeville massacre, obviously, being the incident that's being commemorated, and the first act of the unified South African government was to basically allow Namibia to become an independent state.
I honestly didn't know Namibia was once a part of South Africa. Just very quickly, what was the reason for them to become independent? Was it was it wrongfully taken?
After the Second World War, Namibia used to be a German colony. So when Germany lost the Second World War, they also lost all their colonies, and they were divided up amongst the Allied forces, which is Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States as the United Kingdom's allies, as well as the other European powers like France. Yes.
Okay, I see.
So that's part of the history that brought South Africa into being.
So just going back to Sharpeville, I mean, we can all agree, Uguti, a lot of people have bled for us to celebrate this holiday. So would you say, Uguti, youth and namhlanje iyalmosha leli kusasa that our predecessors bled to create?
I don't think the youth can ruin their own future. in any way, because their future is not determined by them. Currently, the youth are not in charge of what actually happens within this country. They're not in charge of what public holidays we celebrate. They're not in charge of their own education. They're not in charge of the curriculum. They're not in charge of what they're taught. A lot of them don't even know that Namibia was once a part of South Africa.
Yeah.
You understand? So, they cannot be blamed. The blame lies on the older generation, those in leadership for not teaching the youth their history, and also not teaching them about how South Africa can be, this democracy that they now enjoy. And that's why they take it so lightly. And so I wouldn't say that they are to blame, but I would also say that it is their responsibility to ensure that they learn about their history and arm themselves with knowledge of where they come from so that they can know where they're going.
Yes. So, Nota Puti, sicela nje ukudlala ingoma masinyana. When we get back, I'd just like to find out from you, ukuthi, in your own opinion, what are we doing correctly as a youth as opposed to the older generation? Njengoba usho ukuthi we have no control over our future currently. The little bit of control that we do have, what are we doing right with it? So, ngicela ukuthi masesibuya si unpack leyo shandis.
An audience that is global. And South African youth culture is now making an impact around the world. So we're taking advantage of our newfound freedom and showing the world what we've got to offer. So that's what the youth of today is getting right.
That's. Do you feel that it's only in the arts industry that we are growing and showcasing ourselves to the world, or is it other industries, just not as much as the arts industry?
Well, I mean, within the arts, it's the young people that are doing it for themselves a lot of the time. Whereas within sports and other fields, there are established businesses that have been running for a long time. There are federations, there are associations, like the Olympic Committee, etc., etc. So, it's a bit different in that regard, to give them the same sort of credit as a lot of the artists that we see, young artists, that are self-started, doing a lot of things for themselves, or young people in youth-owned businesses, companies, etc. That are also, empowering themselves and each other.
So just talking about the arts, I watch your podcast, by the way. I have no idea why you stopped Everybody Hates Nota, but that's a story for another day. But I was watching your interview with DJ Sbu, and you said Gahle Gahle Cash live. You said it live. You said something I feel everybody people talk about it in the shadows, but you said it live. Gahle Gahle, we weren't freed by Utata Nelson Mandela, but we were actually freed by Umam Miriam Makeba. So
yeah, well, a lot of people have misconstrued what I meant with that statement.
Yes.
So the point was that factually there was no way that Madiba could have freed us from behind bars. There were other factors at play, and we will start finding out a lot more about this in the coming year. Next year is 2023, so it will be 75 years. So a lot of the CIA's correspondence, the American government's correspondence with the apartheid government, will become public knowledge, will be declassified. So we'll see a lot deeper, how much the international powers had a role in keeping South Africa in apartheid,
What?
And so that's something that, people also don't understand, that it came from international pressure. That the apartheid laws were lifted, but the apartheid government were acting on behalf of the United States government. So it becomes very difficult for one to then say, "Hey, Madiba freed us from South Africa," when at the end of the day, the advocacy for freeing South Africa needed to start somewhere else. It needed to start at the United Nations General Assembly, which is in New York. It needed to start in international corridors to put pressure on the powers that be, the Western nations, to actually force the South African government to, start a democratic process and have free and fair elections. And that started in earnest in 1987. And that whole entire transitional process carried through to 1990 when Dr. Nelson Mandela was finally released from prison to the public, having been prepared to lead what would be the government that was going to be elected, And if you think about it, that was the first elections. South Africans didn't really have democracy or political parties. That was the first time they could campaign and everything else. And the ANC really had a lead, because its leaders were the ones that were behind bars and that were brought to the negotiation table.
Yes.
And you could say that the government that we had then was installed, by the Western powers, the United States being one of the main Western powers that saw that government. And for that to happen, a lot of people sacrificed their lives. A lot of people who weren't part of the African National Congress, which ended up governing this country. So a lot of people are saying, no, how can you say that Nelson Mandela didn't free us? The truth is that, no, he did not free us. He left us after we were freed.
Okay, I get you. But I mean, still, it's something that's been in the shadows. But but thank you for explaining it, Kahle. Where I was going with that is that you also mentioned Uguti, artists like Umamire Makeba, they really they did their parts, in social issues and social injustices. So do you feel, Uguti, there is a huge difference between artists to manje and artists that were a part of that made music music that addresses social issues and social injustices? Because we don't really hear that. I mean, we got Umsaki with Guns, Blood and Revolutions, but we don't really hear that type of music. Or is there no need for it in the times we live in now? Hello?
Well, I wouldn't say there's no need for it, What I would say is that, we've lost a lot of impetus because, obviously, we've become used to the idea of calling ourselves free, So, yeah. That is the problem that we find ourselves having right now. But I wouldn't say that, there's any difference between the artists of today and then. The artists of today are mainly talking about the issues that, are confronting them, personally.
Personally, yes.
Whereas the apartheid system and its injustices were personally confronting the artists of the past. The artists of today are also, they will get to a point, every artist grows, even you as a child, you grow to the point. At first, you didn't need an ID,
yes.
And then you need a passport to travel. And then, you start needing more and more things that you didn't need as a child. And that's part of growing up, and if you were to write about your life and the complications of your life when you were a child, it's a rather simple story. But if you talk about the things that you're faced with now, it's a completely different story altogether. So we need to allow also the artists, some of them to grow up, to get older, and also we need to start celebrating and appreciating the art and especially the music that comes from a more mature artist. I mean, music shouldn't have an expiry date. It shouldn't be like now that you're 30-something years old or you're 40 years old, your music career needs to end. You can't make any music because you've got new stories to tell. You've got new life experiences. And this is what I was speaking about in that interview you're referring to earlier, is that we're taking our life advice and our life experience from people who are not even over the age of 25, and we're expecting them to have, more substance than any of us had intelligence at that age.
Certified fresh
on the Gagasi FM and CTM Urban Top 30
with Njinga.